Part 6 of our School Appeals Guidelines. In this module we will be looking at appeals that are not classed as infant class size. These are normally known as normal prejudice, or two-stage appeals. Chapter 1. What is normal prejudice? The first stage of the appeal is for examining the decision to refuse admission. The panel considers whether the school's published admission arrangements complied with the mandatory requirements of the school admissions code, and whether they were correctly applied in your case. It then goes on to consider whether prejudice to the provision of effective education or the efficient use of resources, known as prejudice, would arise if your child were to be admitted to the school. If it is clear that your child would have been offered a place at the school if the admission arrangements had been correctly implemented, and that the school could accommodate one more pupil without prejudice, then the panel will uphold your appeal at this stage. In all other cases, the appeal moves on to the second stage, known as the balancing stage. You will be asked to present your case for wanting your child to be admitted to the school, and the panel will then have to balance your reasons against the prejudice that would be caused to the school if your child were to be admitted. The panel will have to consider the consequences to the school, the admission authority, and other children in the school if they were to allow your appeal, and how serious those consequences would be. The appeal will follow the exact same process for each party to put forward their case that we described in Module 3. When you put your case, this is where you have the opportunity to convince the panel that your case is stronger than that of the authority. Chapter 2. Exceptions. Before we get into the detail of the stages, we will briefly look at what the accepted children are. Remember, within the admission rules there are some exceptions that apply. The accepted children are children admitted outside the normal admissions round with statements of special educational needs or education, health and care plans specifying a school. Looked after children and previously looked after children admitted outside the normal admissions round. Children admitted after initial allocation of places because of a procedural error made by the admission authority or local authority in the original application process. Children admitted after an independent appeals panel upholds an appeal. Children who move into the area outside the normal admissions round for whom there is no other available school within reasonable distance. Children of UK service personnel admitted outside the normal admissions round. Children whose twin or sibling from a multiple birth is admitted otherwise than as an accepted pupil. Children with special educational needs who are normally taught in a special educational needs unit attached to the school, or registered at a special school, who attend some infant classes within the mainstream school. Chapter 3. Let's start by looking at Stage 1 of the appeal, where the admission authority's rules lawful and correctly applied in your case. So what you need to look at here is the authority's published admission code, and whether it is in accordance with the admission guidance document. You need to read both very carefully and check each criteria. Make notes of anything that you think is not compliant and include that in your evidence that you submit. Also send a request to the authority to confirm if the admission code has ever been challenged in court, and what was the outcome of that challenge. Do this prior to the appeal hearing so that you have the full details before you turn up. Otherwise the authority may just say that as far as they know there haven't been any upheld challenges. You can also ask if the admission arrangements have ever been referred to the office of the school's adjudicator. The adjudicator can decide whether to consider whether or not they comply with the admissions law and the code. If you can prove that the admission code did not comply with the mandatory code, your appeal should be upheld. Chapter 4. Okay, so let's look at the next point. Whether these admission arrangements were correctly and impartially applied. This is where it gets slightly more complicated, but also where you can start to really question the authority. There are several areas to look at. Within the authority's admissions arrangements, they will have given a list of what criteria they apply to allocate the spaces. These are known as oversubscription criteria. The authority should rank each application according to this list and allocate places accordingly. It is a good idea to ask the authority in which category the last child fell in that was given a place. You can also look up what this was in previous years to get an idea of how oversubscribed the school is. These are some examples of what might be included. But they also may add in things like children of staff, or medical and social grounds. Check which criteria you think your child should have been in. Ask the authority to tell you which they allocated your child to. What you are trying to prove is that these criteria were not correctly applied, and if they had been, your child would have got a place. We have seen that you should check the oversubscription criteria carefully. What else should you be looking for that would be unlawful? For example, the authority cannot use any of the following criteria. They cannot ask for parents' personal details on any supplemental forms or the application form, such as marriage certificate or first language. Cannot take into account any previous school unless it's a named feeder. Cannot give preference to parents who rank the school as their first preference. Cannot introduce any selection by ability. Cannot discriminate on any grounds. Cannot interview children or parents. Cannot take account of any reports from previous schools. Cannot request any financial contributions. Cannot give priority to a particular nursery. There is a more complete list in the Admissions Code paragraph 1.9. Faith-based oversubscription criteria. Again, you should check this very carefully to ensure the school applied correctly with the admission code. If the school is not full, they must offer a place regardless of the faith of the child. However, if it is oversubscribed, then the school can apply the criteria and give preference to children of faith. But the criteria must be easily understood by parents. Must still give priority to looked after children. The criteria must have been consulted upon by the person representing the faith concerned. They must also clearly define what they determine as practicing that faith. For example, baptism or attendance. The authority should take necessary measures to check the home address of all the applicants to the school. This is to stop fraudulent applications. Admission authorities must clearly set out how the distance from home to the school will be measured, making clear how the home address will be determined and the point in the school from which all distances are measured. This should include provision for cases where parents have shared responsibility for a child, following the breakdown of the relationship and the child lives for part of the week with each parent. Nowadays most authorities have a very accurate mapping system and distances are checked radially from the center of the school to the center of the house. It may be worth checking that they have done this correctly. You will need to ask for this information in advance of the appeal. You should also ask the authority to prove how are applications processed and checked. They should be processed by one person or a team at the school, and checked by another, to make sure there haven't been any mistakes. If you believe that the arrangements haven't been applied correctly, you should contact the authority immediately, as, if you are correct, you may be allocated a space without going to the appeal. Any medical issues can only apply to the child. Unfortunately, medical issues of the parent are not taken into account. If you are appealing on medical grounds, then you will need evidence. Letters from the doctor or hospital where treatment is being given, make sure they are correctly dated and on proper letterhead. You will need to show what the symptoms are and how they affect the child's abilities. You will also need to give some account as to why any particular school is better than another for the needs of the child. You should also check if the school has medical and social reasons in their oversubscription criteria. And if so, were they correctly applied in your case? Chapter 5, Preparing Your Case. In this section we will give some suggestions as to how to prepare your case. During the appeal, the school or authority will likely argue some or all of these points. You need to check what they are saying and prove otherwise. The school is full according to the published admission numbers. The IT equipment is set at that number. The classrooms are too small. There are not enough teachers. There is not enough room to move around the school. There are lots of languages spoken. There are a lot of children with special educational needs or care plans. Schools have a set number of places to fill. This is called the published admission number, PAN. You can ask the admission authority for the PAN. You will also find this in the LA prospectus for schools. Unless the school is a fully selective school, all places must be filled before a child can be refused a place. In the information sent to you before the appeal hearing, there will be school details such as the number of staff, number of pupils on roll, size of classrooms, layout of the school, etc. If you do not have the details you need to prepare your case, ask the admission authority for this information. The school's case should also explain how admitting an extra child will have a negative effect on the quality of the education they can provide. Think about the physical space and layout of the school. Find out if the school has any plans to create extra space by building an extension or using rooms in a different way. You could ask the admission authority how many appeals were successful last year. This might mean that the school could cope with extra pupils if they have managed this in the past. Chapter 6, Preparing Your Case. In this section we will give some suggestions as to how to prepare your case. You will need to think carefully about the following factors when preparing your case. Make notes for each of the sections that are relevant to your case and your child. Careful planning will help you put together a well-thought-out case. Check everything we have mentioned above and make notes. Start your points like, I do not think the school's admission criteria follows the Department for Education code because, I do not think the admission rules have been followed or have been unfairly applied because, I think an error has been made in my case. Make it very clear what the law says and what you are saying is wrong with the way the admission code has been written. Quote the paragraph numbers and wording if you need. If your child has a disability and you feel the admission authority has discriminated against your child, for example by treating your application differently than for other children, or refusing to accept it, you may be able to claim disability or other discrimination. Start your comments like, I think my child has been discriminated against because. For all of the above points that apply, you should detail why you think the school's case is not correct. Start your comments with, I believe that the school could take an extra pupil because. Or, I disagree with the school's claim that. Think about your child. Imagine you are describing them to a stranger. Think about how each point affects your child in school and at home. Remember, the panel do not know your child. Do not expect them to guess. You must explain and give examples. Points about your child that could fit with why this school is needed. Some suggestions are listed here. But you must say for each point you make why that is significant. Take the first point my child is good at. Perhaps you would say maths and science. But you must then go on to say why that is important in terms of the school you are requesting. For example, it may be a STEM school. Just saying he's good at maths or putting his last report is not enough. There will be lots of other children with the same or even better grades. Why my child must go to this school. It is very important to think of all the issues that show how only the school you are appealing for can meet your child's needs. It is not enough to say it is a good school, as all parents want that for their children. It is best to split this into two parts. 1. Why the school would be the right one for your child, and 2. Why it would be difficult for your child if they did not go to this school. List all the positive points about the school that you can think of. Use information from visits and documents such as the school prospectus, the most recent Ofsted report, school policies and the school website. Here are some more examples that you can consider to bolster your argument as to why your child should attend a particular school. It has a good anti-bullying policy. It has good sports facilities or music facilities. My child really liked the school. Most of my child's friends are community go there. It is very close to where we live, a very easy journey. It is a mixed school or a single-sex school. It teaches 3 modern languages or single sciences, etc. Explain in detail why each point you make is so important for your child. Start your comments with the statement, this school is the right one for my child because. Explain what may happen if your child cannot go to this school. Show how your child will be affected at home and in school. If there are strong family reasons for needing this school and no other, include them here. Again, do not expect the panel to guess, you must explain. Remember, problems affect different children in different ways. It is very important that you look carefully at the school you have been offered and other schools with places available. Visit them with your child. If you think that going to the other schools would cause your child problems, you will need to be specific and explain why. Would the journey be particularly difficult? Does the curriculum not offer the right subjects or specialized facilities? Think of all the problems your child is likely to face. If you do not visit them with your child, the panel will think that you are not giving the allocated school a chance. Again, explain the effects on your child. You can also, if necessary, make a comment such as, if my child does not go to the school, I am very worried that. And remember, never start a negative campaign against the school you have been allocated. Simply stating the Ofsted report is poor will not gain you any sympathy with the panel. Also remember that many appeals do not get through and your child may well end up there anyway, so don't be too negative in front of them. If you can, it is best to type your appeal case. Use headings and bullet points to organize your information. This will make it as easy as possible for the appeal panel to read and digest your case. You could ask a friend or family member to read through your case to check it is easy to understand. If you have a lot of documents and evidence to support your case, put them as numbered appendices to your main case with references in the text. Send your case to the clerk, along with all your evidence, and take copies of everything with you to the appeal hearing. Here is an example statement you might want to consider. Select the points that are relevant based on your notes and add the details for each point. Chapter 7. Once the panel has heard all the evidence from both the authority and you, they will make their decision. This is done after you have left the room and the panel have chance to discuss. They will make their decision based on a balancing act of the authority's case against your case. The panel must balance the prejudice to the school against the appellant's case for the child to be admitted to the school. It must take into account the appellant's reasons for expressing a preference for the school, including what that school can offer the child that the allocated or other schools cannot. If the panel considers that the appellant's case outweighs the prejudice to the school, it must uphold the appeal. What is prejudice? As this is not such a commonly used word, it is worth understanding what it means in this context. Whilst the panel must take into account the school's published admission number, the admission authority must be able to demonstrate prejudice over and above the fact that the published admission number has already been reached. The panel must not reassess the capacity of the school, but must consider the impact on the school of admitting additional children. In reaching a decision as to whether or not there would be prejudice, the panel may consider the following factors. What effect an additional admission would have on the school in the current and following academic years as the year group moves through the school. Whether any changes have been made to the school's physical accommodation or organization since an admission number was originally set for the relevant year group. The impact of the locally agreed fair access protocol. The impact on the organization and size of classes, the availability of teaching staff, and the effect on children already at the school. In the next module, Part 7, we will cover example questions to ask yourself in advance. And also some examples of questions that may be applicable to your case, that you should ask the authority.